Welcome to Pre-Technical Mathematics. This video lecture is on the basic operations. Chapter 1, Section 2. These should be pretty familiar to you, but we're going to review them here. When we have a positive plus a positive, we end up with a positive number. When we have a positive plus a negative, we take the sign of the larger value. So if it were 4 plus negative 6, it would be the sign of the larger value, negative 2. Okay, when we subtract a negative by a negative, it actually is a negative plus a positive. What we do actually is take this negative inside here and we change it to a positive. See here? We change it to a positive. And that changes the sign inside the parentheses. So we change it to an addition problem, and then we change the sign inside the parentheses. Let's review multiplication. A negative times a negative is a positive. Remember, like signs are positive. Unlike signs, a negative times a positive is a negative. Now, a few things with adding, multiplying, and dividing fractions. With fractions, whenever you encounter fractions, remember that you must work with the LCD. And what did we say the LCD was? Right, the least common denominator. So when we're adding 2/3 and negative 5/6, our least common denominator between the two denominators is 6. So we change this to 6 by multiplying by 2. And we don't have to touch this second one. So we end up with 4/6 plus a negative 5/6 gives us a negative 1/6. Okay, when we're multiplying fractions, it becomes a lot easier. We don't have to worry about that least common denominator. We can just multiply across. So in this case, we have 3 times negative 5 and 4 times 8. The parentheses mean to multiply. So what do we end up with? Negative 15 over 4 times 8 is 32. Now, when we divide fractions, you first need to take the number you are dividing by and change it to a multiplied by its reciprocal. So let's see what that looks like. Negative 5/8. We leave that alone. Now we change it to a multiply problem and we take its reciprocal. The reciprocal is 3/2, the opposite of what we've got there. So now it's just a multiplication problem the same as above. Negative 5 times 3 over 8 times 2 should give us negative 15/16. So we've actually done a division by multiplying by its reciprocal. Alright, now we have the rules. Let's see if we can remember them and do a couple of problems. Okay, we start off pretty simple. Negative 9 plus a negative 8. We're adding like symbols, so it becomes negative 17. That's rule number 1. Okay, let's keep going. Here we jump to some fractions. Whoops, I forgot to erase that 17. Let's get that out of there. Okay, a positive 1 1/3 minus a negative 5/6. First, let's change this into an improper fraction. So we'd have 3/3 plus 1. This would change to 4/3. Okay, then we have minus a negative 5/6. Alright, when we're adding or subtracting fractions, we need what? Least common denominator, and in this case, it equals 6. So we need to multiply this fraction by 2 in order to end up with 6. So let's do that step first. 8/6 minus a negative 5/6. So now it becomes 8 minus a negative 5. Now we got to do something with that pretty soon. Over 6. Okay. Minus a negative changes to plus a positive. When you have two negatives together, it ends up positive. So this actually can be rewritten as 8 plus 5 minus a negative over 6. We end up with 13/6, and we can change that back to a mixed number, which is 2 1/6. Alright, so there's our adding and subtracting of fractions. Alright, here's an example of multiplying fractions. In this case, we do not need to worry about least common denominator. We can simply multiply across. So we have 3 times a negative 5 over 4 times 8 should give us negative 15 over 32. I think you're getting the idea that multiplying fractions is much easier than adding and subtraction of fractions. Alright, we did that pretty well. Let's keep going. We want to get an example of dividing fractions. Now first, let's change this mixed number into a fraction. So that gives us 7/4 divided by a negative 2/3. Now we said when we divide, we want to change it to a multiplication problem and use its reciprocal. So we have 7/4 times 3/2. Now, it doesn't really matter where this negative sign is, whether it's in the top or the bottom. It will end up in your final answer in the top. So if we multiply across, the 7 times 3 is 21, and the 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. We can rewrite this again as negative 21/8. It makes no difference. We just normally are used to seeing the negative sign in the top of a fraction. So we can change that again to a mixed number of 2 and 5/8. Alright, let's let you try. Let me get rid of this. Pause or stop the tape if you need help. The answers are in the information section of the website. Here's another problem. Multiplying numbers. Try this one. Adding fractions. Remember the rules of adding fractions. Here's your last one, multiplying fractions. And for some reason I didn't give you an example of dividing fractions. Okay, again, we're back to those nasty word problems. Let's take a look at this and apply it to what we've learned about positive and negative numbers and their properties. A planer. This is a tool that removes a small amount of material when it's rubbed across it. Removes 1/5 of an inch from a 1 5/8 inch board. Find the thickness of the finished board. Okay, so we have a 1 5/8 board. And we are removing. Removing is equal to minus. Removing 1/5. Okay, now we know when we subtract fractions, we need least common denominator, so we'll make that into 40ths. We need to multiply this by 5. We need to multiply this by 8. Okay. So we better change this first. Let's see, 8 is 13/8 times 5 minus 1/5 times 8. Okay, and when we multiply this out, we end up with 1 17/40. So we've answered our word problem. We're going to try one more. Let's see what we've got here. A company purchased 12 reams of paper at $11.95 per ream. 3 toner cartridges at $7.99 per cartridge. What was the total cost? If we're looking for a total, we're looking to add these. Now what we've got is 12 reams at $11.95 per ream. So we can multiply that, and we should get $143.40. Now we have also added to that purchase 3 toner cartridges at $79.99 per cartridge. That should give us a total of $239.85, and we'll include our dollar mark. We add these together, and that should give us our total purchase. $383.25. So we've added the purchases together. Okay. This concludes this video lecture.